I'm very pleased that you are joining us today on this very special day, of course, which is the US Elections Day, and also because we have this event in Florence in which we, as the RFK Center in Florence, we are looking at the US elections, especially from the human rights perspectives, and we are looking at both the human rights domain, let's say the issues within the United States, and also the US policies to promote democracy and human rights abroad. And at the same time, and we have a lot on our plate, we also try to look back to the era that you know as a participant observer, of course, at the late 60s, to see what the differences are of the agendas and also of the elections as a whole. So I would like to start with the last point. What do you see as the major differences between the campaigns that you also participated in as the press secretary of Senator Robert Kennedy in '68 and the electoral campaign today in 2012? What are there any similarities? It's too far back, or actually there are many similarities. So can you develop a little bit on this?
Well, I'd say the major difference is cable television and all that it's involved, not just on the screen, but in people's pockets, on their laptops, YouTube, Facebook, all the social media, none of which were present in 1968. There were no cell phones. And the result was that there were really only two news cycles. Either you made news in the morning for the newspapers, or you did it in the evening for the television news on 3 networks. And that's a huge difference. Today's campaign was conducted 24 hours a day. If there was any news cycle, it might last 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Somebody would make a charge, somebody else would have to answer, either personally or through a surrogate. And the result is that it was a much nastier, superficial campaign than the one in 1968, where you could give some serious thought to the issues and present them one at a time.
Thank you. In terms of the agenda for human rights, of course, things have changed a lot because of the civil liberties movement in the United States in the 60s. Things have changed, of course, in the past 44 years. But do you also see at the same time things that you would have liked or you would have hoped that would have changed in the past 44 years that have not yet changed, and that you really see as the most important issues to be dealt with by the next president, whether it will be the second term of Obama or it will be Romney? What is still the unfinished business, actually, of the late 60s?
Well, the unfinished business of the late 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and the present century is, of course, race. Blacks and whites, Latinos and whites. And that issue, of course, is still with us, very much so. Certainly a lot of the hostility to President Obama is because of his race. I think this election would be vastly different if that issue were not present, even inarticulate as it sometimes is. But in addition, the emphasis on human rights campaigning has switched from race to sex. We have now the Human Rights Campaign is the name of the national organization of gay men and women. And that's become an issue of same-sex marriage, civil unions, a variety of issues surrounding that relationship, or forbidden or permitted. And there are indeed some measures on the ballots today in a few states that would either take that right away if it's already been granted, or add it if it is not. So that issue has shifted slightly, but there is still some human rights campaigning and certainly some unresolved issues. But this campaign is between the two candidates for president has been remarkably free of that issue, except that, of course, for Obama's race, it's been always present.
Let us turn to the international domain. I mean, the United States has always been strong. We speak about also the US exceptionalism. I mean, the importance for the United States to promote democracy and human rights abroad has always been, or not always, but has been on and off very high on the agenda of the incumbent president. Where does America stand today in terms of promoting human rights and democracy abroad? Does it still have the same, let's say, moral strength and also the credibility, internationally speaking, to promote democracy and human rights as it has been, as it has done over the past decades and actually over the past century, or has this really changed over the recent period?
Well, in this campaign between Governor Romney and President Obama, was hardly present at all. Neither candidate cared to talk very much about it, mostly because it's become, in its slogans at least, not very popular. Each candidate stressed, well, we need to build the economy here at home. We need nation building here in this nation. And the result is that the issues, whether in Syria or Libya or Egypt, or for that matter in countries all over the world, has been mostly put aside. It's still there. The United States is still very much behind the advancement of human rights around the world, a form of nation building. But we don't talk about it. It certainly has not become an election issue, as it was so much in the 60s.
Yes, but what is your perception that how the world looks at the United States? I mean, is your sense that the world still looks at the United States as an engine for change, for democracy, for human rights? Of course, as also Kerry earlier today indicated, earlier this evening for us, for you it's still, of course, day, that, of course, communism has collapsed, so the world has really changed over the past 40 years. But what do you think is the perspective from those that look at the United States from the outside? Do you still think that the outside still looks at the United States as a beacon, as an example to emulate, to follow, to believe in? Or do you think that this has changed, especially over the last few decades?
I think it probably has just changed. I think countries have a lesser view, a smaller view, a less favorable view of the United States, particularly in that area, because we've done so little. We've helped some movements, Egypt, Libya, a few others, Algeria, Tunisia perhaps, and certainly in parts of Africa. But in general, it has not been the clarion call that it has been in the past for American presidents. Partly because of the economic recession and the unwillingness to spend capital and, of course, human life in nation building abroad when we have so much building and rebuilding to do of our nation here at home. So I think probably we're less regarded around the world as the champion of human rights and the spread of democracy. I think our national attitude is probably, yes, democracy and human rights are a good thing, and if you want them in your country, go out and get them on your own. But we're not going to spend a lot of money and certainly very little human life in defense of it.
Thank you very much for these answers. As you may know, this is a concluding evening and night of a larger event. The first part of this event was a 1.5-day training seminar for Italian students from various universities, from Milan, Florence, and Rome, and also from universities, US universities here in Florence, that, as you may know, there are, I believe, about 30 American universities have programs here in Florence. So we had a group of 35 students following a number of courses on human rights, on political economy, and of course on the political system in the United States and the increasing polarization of politics in the US. And maybe, if you allow me, I would like to ask the students whether anyone has a question for you. So let's see whether we can manage this. It's the first time we do it. Yes, can you stand up and can you tell, of course, who you are and ask the question?
Hi, my name is Megan and I go to Gonzaga University here in Florence. And my question is a little more related to the election than human rights, but knowing that you were a former president of NPR, National Public Radio for the United States, I was wondering what your opinion is on how the media influences the elections, and especially our TV media and the different like partisan TV channels, and how NPR is different and how you think that affects the results of the election.
Well, I don't think television, particularly cable coverage of the election, has been that good. Mostly because most Americans watch television channels that offer opinion with which they agree. So that the conservatives watch Fox, liberals watch MSNBC, and people who want information listen to National Public Radio. But I think what has happened as a result is that the campaigning has been much more personal and less on issues. It's become almost the province of the fact checkers, and whether you can prove that the other candidate is not telling the truth. And that's not a very elevated way in which to conduct a campaign. And so I think probably campaigning itself may have suffered a little bit because it's so much more available. But certainly we've had plenty of coverage. And if you want information about the campaigns, it's available. Sometimes you have to dig for it, because the main purpose of television particularly is not so much to entertain or to inform, but to build an audience for the advertisers. And that means controversy. And that means keeping an election closer than it might otherwise be, because if it's not a contest, nobody's going to be interested and devote much attention to it. I think President Obama's been ahead in this campaign since it began, but it's been hard to discover that from the coverage.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Frank Mankiewicz. Thank you so much for being with us and for sharing your thoughts. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.